All right, we're about to dive into one of the oldest questions in all of philosophy, but we're going to tackle it with a pretty radical approach. We're not looking at brain scans. We're not debating ancient texts. Nope. Instead, we're going to walk through a formal proof that argues free will isn't just, unlikely, it's a logical impossibility.
So what does that even mean, a contradiction in terms? Well, the argument we're exploring today claims that the phrase free will makes as much sense as married bachelor. The whole idea is that once you get really precise about what those two words actually mean, the concept it completely falls apart. This isn't about science, this is about pure logic.
For literally centuries, the free will debate has felt like this unwinnable tug-of-war, right? You've got determinism on one side, freedom on the other, and nobody ever seems to make any real ground.
And that's exactly where this proof makes its move. It basically suggests that the reason we're all stuck is because we've been trying to smash two ideas together that are fundamentally incompatible. The problem isn't out there in the world of neurons and atoms, or in some metaphysical realm of souls. It's right there in the dictionary.
Okay, so to really see this supposed contradiction, we have to get surgically precise with our language. Let's break down the two key terms right at the heart of this thing. First, we'll look at will, and then we'll look at freedom.
First up, will. The proof calls it demonstrated will, which is just a fancy way of saying any action you actually, do. Think about something simple, like reaching for a cup of coffee. For that to happen, you need a motive, you're tired, you need memory, coffee has helped before, and you need perception, you can actually see the cup. All of these things are inputs, they're causes. Your will can't just exist in a vacuum. It absolutely has to be part of this web of cause and effect to even work at all.
Now, let's look at freedom in its absolute strongest sense, what philosophers often call libertarian freedom. This is the idea that your choices genuinely originate from you and only you. You are the ultimate author of your actions, not just some domino in a long chain. So to be truly free in this sense, your decisions can't be determined by any causes that you didn't create yourself.
And right here, laying it out side by side, we see the fundamental clash. On one hand, you've got will, which, as we said, requires all those causal inputs, your memories, your desires, the world around you. But then, on the other hand, you have freedom, which requires the complete absence of those very same influences. One demands their presence, the other demands they're not there at all. You just can't have both at the same time.
But hold on, there's a classic and really powerful counterargument here. What if there was some being, some agent that did author the entire causal chain? A true first cause. So let's meet this ultimate challenge head-on. The proof gives it a name, NOOC. That stands for a necessary, omniscient, omnipotent creator. This is the theoretical being that could, in theory, escape our contradiction, precisely because it's supposed to be the author of, everything.
And you gotta admit, the argument is pretty strong. I mean, if this being, Noach, created the whole universe, every single law of physics, every particle, every event that ever happened, then by definition, there are no external causes influencing it. It is the ultimate author. So it really does seem like Noach is the one exception, the one being that could have both a will and be truly free.
But this is where the proof has a countermove, and it gets right to the very heart of what it means to be an author in the first place. It asks a deeper and, frankly, much trickier question.
This, right here, is the crucial question. Okay, sure, maybe Nuke's decision to create everything came from its own nature, its own desires, its own way of thinking. But where did that nature come from? Did Nuke's actually choose to be the kind of being that it is? And here's why that question is impossible to get around. Just look at the logic. To choose your own nature A, you would have already needed a nature B that had the preferences and values to make that specific choice. But then where did nature B come from? Well, you'd need a nature C to choose that one, and on and on and on, forever. It's what's called an infinite regress. You can never create yourself from nothing.
And that is the absolute killer blow to this idea of self-creation. An infinite chain of reasons isn't a solid foundation for authorship. It's the exact opposite. It's a bottomless pit. There is no starting point, no true origin, no foundation at all.
So we're left with these two dead ends. Either Nuke's nature was self-authored, which, as we just saw, leads to that infinite regress with no foundation, or its nature was just unauthored. It was a given, an unchosen fact about itself. But if its own nature was unchosen, then it was determined, not free. Neither path gets you to libertarian freedom. It's a perfect logical trap.
Okay, so if this logic actually holds up and free will is impossible, that sounds kind of bleak. What does that actually mean for how we live our day-to-day lives?
Right. Before we go any further, let's be super clear about what this proof is not saying. This is not a permission slip for fatalism. It doesn't mean you should just throw your hands up because your choices don't matter. And it absolutely positively does not claim that your experience of making a choice is some kind of illusion. That feeling is 100% real.
Now, what this proof is claiming is that your process of deliberation, thinking through your options, is a very real and very critical part of the causal chain that leads to an outcome. Your choices absolutely matter. That feeling you get is a real psychological event. The only thing this argument throws out is the metaphysical story about a tiny, ghost-like self that exists completely outside of that causal chain, just pulling the levers.
I think this just sums it up perfectly. The internal experience of being you, of weighing your options, and finally making a decision, that is a completely genuine phenomenon. What's being rejected is simply the idea of a ghost in the machine, an uncaused cause that doesn't just happen to not exist, but logically cannot exist. And so, all of this leaves us with a really fascinating and maybe a little unsettling question. If the idea of a completely free self is a logical story we've been telling ourselves, then what are we? We're obviously not just simple robots, but we're not these uncaused authors either. This proof doesn't hand us the answer, but by clearing away what's logically impossible, it challenges us to come up with a much better and more honest story of who we really are.